This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Lunchtime Show. Thanks for joining me. Today my special guest is English teacher Leonardo Lima from Brazil, currently taking a Masters in Education in the UK. And we'll be talking about decentering ELT, artificial intelligence in ELT, and action research.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Sunday Lunchtime Show, everyone. I'm Stanley, speaking to you live from Mexico City. As I mentioned earlier, on today's show, I'll be talking to Leonardo Lima about decentering English language teaching and learning, ELT and AI, and action research, three of Leonardo's current educational passions. Leonardo is a passionate Brazilian language teacher with over 18 years in the field. He has taught diverse language learners across various levels and cultural backgrounds, developed customized curricula, trained teachers, and led assessment processes in both traditional and remote settings. Currently pursuing a Masters in Education TESOL as a Hornby Scholar at the University of Exeter in the UK, and now working on a dissertation on examining artificial intelligence and English language teaching. His approach emphasizes personalization, real-world application, and creating inclusive, engaging learning environments. And I'll be talking to Leonardo about his work and more after the Teachers Talk Radio News.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK, home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development programme, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Exclusion rates are in the news again. with BBC North East and Cumbria focusing on a study which says North East England will continue to have the highest rate of children being excluded and suspended from schools. According to research by think tank IPPR and charity The Difference, Redcar and Cleveland, Middlesbrough, Hartlepool and Newcastle are amongst the highest in the area for exclusion rates. The report highlights a direct link between deprivation in the region and high suspension and exclusion figures. Middlesbrough Council responded by saying it was a trend we are determined to reverse. Middlesbrough's exclusion rate is 28.1% and is 3 times the national average, with Redcar and Cleveland's even higher at 32.7%. The research concludes that the correlation between poverty and exclusion would make regional divides harder to tackle. Others pointed to lack of resources, specialist staff, and a lack of freedom with curriculum as further pressures schools and pupils face. A spokesperson for the Department for Education said the rising numbers were shocking and showed the massive scale of disruptive behaviour that has developed in schools. The spokesperson went on to say the Department for Education was committed to providing access to specialist mental health professionals in every school and ensuring earlier intervention in mainstream schools for pupils with special needs. The Guardian has more details on the figures across England on its website. In Northern Ireland, schools are being advised to restrict pupils' use of mobile phones during the school day. Education Minister Paul Givan issued new guidance which also applies to limiting use at break and lunch times. He said there was a growing evidence that phones distract children from learning. He also said the guidance would allow teachers to do what they do best, teach. Mr. Givan pointed out that many countries across the world are increasingly taking steps to stop phone use at school, and that the new guidance would allow schools in Northern Ireland to be fully aware of the latest evidence and practical advice. The guidance is being accompanied by a pilot of phone-free solutions, including inviting expressions of interest from schools to use pocket-sized pouches which phones will be placed in. The pouch is then closed by using a magnetic latch. UNESCO, the United Nations Education and Science body, has also previously advised that smartphones should be banned from schools. The previous guidance to schools in Northern Ireland on mobile devices was 8 years old and mainly focused on possible educational uses of phones. In a week that has seen the announcement of the abolishment of 1 or 2 word inspection grades, as well as other changes to Ofsted inspections, the Church of England has released a report which highlights the positive impact of moving away from such gradings. The annual SIAMS inspection report, which can be found on the Church of England website, outlines key recommendations to support continuous improvement in church schools. The report reveals what it calls a smooth transition away from single-word grades to a more compassionate, contextual approach to accountability. Under the new framework, over 99% of SIAMS inspections in the last academic year were described as less stressful but more robust. This is a contrast to the BBC's reporting that Ofsted's response to a head teacher's suicide following a school inspection was defensive and complacent. Dame Christine Gilbert's independent review was commissioned after an inquest into the death of Ruth Perry. Ofsted's Chief Inspector, Sir Martin Oliver, accepted most of the review's findings. The findings come after the government scrapped the overall gradings for inspections. Further details of the review can be found across media outlets. Schools Week reports that Ofsted has named the members of 7 new external reference groups that will offer independent advice and challenge as it embarks on reforms. The groups will meet 3 times a year and between them will discuss and challenge Ofsted's data, research and evaluation plans and act as expert advisors on their specialities. They will also advise on any proposed developments and give advice on aspects of training relating to leader and staff well-being. The full list of members can be found on the Schools Week website, but they include recognisable names such as Chris Patterson from the Education Endowment Foundation, Claire Seeley from the States of Guernsey, and Matt Hood of Oak Academy, who will be focusing on curriculum. The Behaviour and Attendance Group includes Tom Bennett of Research Ed and Catherine Roper from Wiltshire Police, as well as Sarah Clark from the National Network of Parent Carer Forums. Other reference groups will focus on inclusion, well-being of leaders and staff, early years and social care, and insights and education. Finally, a US court has charged a father in relation to a school shooting allegedly committed by his 14-year-old son. The gun attack resulted in the death of 4 people at a school in Georgia. The 14-year-old is charged with 4 counts of murder, whilst his father is charged with second-degree murder, manslaughter and child cruelty. They are the most severe charges brought against a parent after a school shooting, and the judge in the case told the 54-year-old father he could face up to 180 years in prison. He is accused of allowing his son to possess an AR-15 style rifle, which is alleged to have been used in the attack. The case has again prompted discussion about gun laws, school safety, and the responsibility of parents for the criminal actions of their children. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Welcome back, everyone, and I'm pleased to have Leonardo Lima as my special guest on today's show. Leonardo, how are you and what have you been up to today?
Hey, Gran, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm today, as you know, but maybe our listeners don't. I've been living in Exeter for about a year, and it's been raining for 3 days straight. and Graham, you told me that during IATAFL, and that every British person has the habit of looking up the weather forecast. And I've acquired that habit myself. So and it's incredible. It doesn't compare to how often I do in Brazil, because here I check it 3 to 4 times a day minimum. So it's lovely.
Yes. Well, welcome to the UK. I think that's there is a reason why the weather is the most typical topic of conversation for people, especially when they first meet, and you're finding out why. I guess it's very, very different from Brazil. Whereabouts in Brazil are you originally from?
I am originally from Recife. I live actually in a place, in a historical city in the metropolitan area called Olinda. You might have heard of.
Yes.
Beautiful multicultural city, carnival center in Brazil, let's say, and the very traditional street carnival, and lovely place, very colorful. Yes, and by the end of the year, I'll be heading back to Olinda, to Recife. So, but I love here actually, and this thing about looking up the forecast, as simple as it may sound, it is a reminder to me of the environmental issues that we've been facing, because even the British, if this is common for the British, but I've heard from every local lad that even this is not common. This is too much, even for the British usual weather change. This is just too much. Anyway.
Yes. No. Unfortunately, that's you hear that everywhere. I'm sure even in Recife, which I did get to visit once. I'd been there I was there for a Brastisol conference many years ago, but it's a wonderful place. So I understand why you wouldn't need to look at the weather forecast in Recife every day.
I was wondering, you said I visited, I was like, for carnival? But it's lovely. And as you know, in Brazil, when we get more steady weather, but when it rains, once it does, it really buckets down. And it really does.
So Leonardo, I usually start by asking my guests how they become teachers. So I'd love to hear what led you to end up working in the world of education, in particular English language teaching.
This story is quite interesting, because my first contact with English language was when I was a kid. So living in Recife, across the street from our family, Graham. There was a British teacher, and he was teaching in Recife at some schools, some language schools. Andrew is his name, and he's originally from Bath.
Right.
And then my dad having conversations with him, I was 5 at the time, and he was like, Andrew, would you mind giving Leo some lessons, And he's so curious, he's a curious boy, I'm sure he would love the language. And then after the first lesson, I was very curious indeed, but let's say that I was a very, very agitated kid. I was not and then he said, I remember after first lesson, he gave a feedback. He was like, sir, Leo has a hard time sitting quietly, right? In the room. I was like, yeah, but he was very helpful because, Graham, I ended up loving the language because of Andrew. I owe to him falling in love with the English language so early in my life because of him. Because as I was starting the literacy process, he introduced me to some reading. And that, believe me, kept me quiet.
Wow.
Kept me paying attention, kept me curious. And so he used to present me, of course, there was which I don't remember the details, I was so young, but when he talks to me, he mentions some trial and error before reaching that point, finding reading as that soft spot for me. But he tells me that he used passages from graded readers, and of course to accommodate to my level as a beginner and as a child, and he did some of those accommodations himself, and that worked, and I grew up with that appreciation for the English language since that early age. And when I was a teenager at school, I had the first opportunity to be what we call in Brazil a monitor, but it's like a student assistant teacher. At the time, there was a program at the high school where I was at, and that's how it began. And it was so lovely at the time. And I went to private tutoring. Then I had decided, okay, I want to do this for my life and be doing it ever since. 18 years officially as a teacher working,
wow.
But if we count that period, it's 25 plus, when I started as a teenager. So,
Right, fantastic.
And I love it.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK, home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development programme improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
So, Leonardo, you're currently a Hornby Scholar studying for a master's degree, as you said, at the University of Exeter in the UK. Could you explain to those who don't know what Hornby is, what being a Hornby Scholar entails?
Yeah, and well, there is an institution. It is the AES Hornby Educational Trust, and it is an institution based here in the UK. And basically, Hornby provides nearly every year. There were a few gaps here and there, but it happens every year. They give the opportunity. They receive applications from teachers that are based or from middle and low income countries, and then they select a cohort of between 7 and 10 teachers each year, and they come to the UK to participate in their program by studying a master's in one of their partner universities. And right now it is the University of Exeter. And so it is expected that after concluding this tenure as a Hornby Scholar, we become a Hornby alumni, and we are expecting to conduct some projects in our context, in our countries, where we may do, of course, many things as we can to enhance our context, and the mindset behind all of this is driven by what's called by the Trust as the Decentering ELT initiative. Now it's the main mindset, and this was launched by the Trust in 2018. And the aim of this Decentering ELT is to promote the development of contextually appropriate thinking and action in terms of methodology, materials design, curriculum development, teacher education, and so forth. And all of that with a specific focus on the needs of learners and teachers of English in public education systems, mainly in the low and middle income countries. And it is really interesting because Decentering ELT, and everyone who is listening to us, highlights teachers on development. And it's all in terms of being contextually appropriate, thinking and action in relation to the needs of our local context. So it's basically empowering our local context. It's not just the kind of thing that, okay, they bring us to the UK so that we may learn and do. No, it's a two-way deal. We also come here to bring some of our context to the scene, because the idea is to leverage the Global South and the Global North methodologies, approaches to education, to English language education, to teaching, because Hornby promotes this idea that there is so much being done in the Global South. And sometimes the methodologies, which are, of course, from the Global North perspective, research and authors, they are dominating, of course, as we know, in terms of ideology, philosophy, and all of that. However, they do not apply to certain contexts. Context is so powerful, it may hinder what we know, what we were trained to do in terms of teaching. So Hornby raises that awareness, and that's why they have this initiative. So every year, a cohort with many others like myself come to the UK to study and then go back to our countries to resume our work in ELT. So
Fantastic. That's a great introduction to both Hornby, who the scholarship gives opportunities to so many different English teachers around the world, which is wonderful. And I think Hornby was originally a lexicographer, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Behind the Oxford Dictionary?
Yeah, absolutely. And we Hornby has ties to that. Yet part of the funding, part of the revenue for the Oxford Learners, Advanced Learners Dictionary is reverted to this cause as well. So,
Right.
yeah.
Wonderful. And so this idea of decentering ELT, which we decided was going to be our first topic, is really interesting. And I'd love to hear, I suppose, more your own personal experience of how that works in practice, both where you are at the moment in your masters, but also your experience of it in Brazil.
Yeah, and it is interesting, and I am just as much as any other Hornby alumni. I am passionate. I have a passion for context. I do. It's so powerful, and it may, as I say, it may enhance or hinder approaches, methodologies, and so forth. And basically, the word of ELT has been characterized by a hegemony of sorts of global or center approaches, right? And materials developed outside the teaching contexts in which they are expected to be applied. So, however, these approaches, these materials, these frames for action, so-called, they are not necessarily appropriate to and do not recognize teachers and other insiders' experience and expertise in those contexts. Even those materials that are research-led, sometimes they are, most times, I'd say, they are driven by research conducted in global north context, research context. So this may be something else too. And the decentering perspective involves both valuing and seeking to understand how teachers in these global south contexts, often collaborating with each other, collaboration is key, they try to articulate key features of working, of their work, and ways they feel their practice can be improved. So basically it highlights teachers' own development of contextually appropriate thinking and action. So because what I do in Brazil may not be useful for, like I'll mention here a couple of Hornby colleagues, Dan Kimati from Kenya does in his classes, or Iviri Racifato in Cameroon, because they have classes with dozens of students. Even for Brazil, the number is too much, because in Brazil, we may have a classroom in a regular school, in a public school, with 50 students, which is already unbearable. It's a lot. So imagine, Graham, talking about peer learning as it is expected to be in that context. So, of course, we need to develop different approaches and methodological concepts to deal with those contexts, because I guarantee you there is no approach that sees that setting as ideal. So everything that is based on global north methodologies need to be accommodated, mitigated, whatever you name it, to those challenging contexts. So,
yes. Yeah. And class size is just one of the aspects that may well be very different in the context where yourself and others, such as your colleague in Kenya, are working. Did you say your colleague in Kenya was sometimes had to teach a class size of 1,000?
Not 1,000, but dozens, like about 100 people in a classroom. Yeah.
Well, yeah. What other things do you think are important when it comes to decentering ELT, apart from class sizes being, what other contextual elements are important for people who are involved in trying to think about methodologies or need to take into account?
One of the challenges that, and I advocate for this myself, it is about what's required from teachers in terms of lesson planning, the off-classroom work per se, because in Brazil, a teacher that works full-time, he's expected, in a public school setting, he's expected to be in the classroom for a minimum of 40 hours weekly. That is the minimum.
40 hours contact. That's contact hours. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's contact hours with students being in the classroom. So we're not talking about meetings, trainings, and the paperwork. We're just mentioning that. And we know that a very crucial element of the workload is planning the lesson, because we deal with human beings, and there is nothing that creates more variables than dealing with people, because people are unpredictable recipients. So, and you have that experience yourself. I have, many others, those who are listening. We deliver the same lesson plan, same lesson to different groups, and the outcomes will be different basically every time. So lesson planning requires a lot of time to tailor, to rethink, redesign, recreate, and what is happening is that because they have no time, they are recycling previous lesson plans, and it's not being really tailored, personalized. So this is one problem. So the lesson planning is one of the things that is really, really a problem, because they are not being able to tailor that to their context appropriately. So that's why doing that by yourself has this huge barrier. So collaboration is key. Like it is hard to ask for a teacher individually to, under those circumstances, to do lesson planning at a level that we would consider like really high. However, if we cooperate together, and that can be at institutional level, teacher associations, there are so many ways of doing that. Communities of practice, we'll talk about that when we talk about action research, but those things, they mitigate that. And what happens because of this, because teachers have so much time in the classroom and they have those demands, they are becoming islands. I know that John Donne said that no man is an island, but maybe he didn't have teachers in mind when he said that, because class observations are becoming each time like less and less common, because of these time pressing matters, these issues. And we know that when, depending on who the observator is going to be, like for example here in the UK, I had the chance to observe some classes in a few schools. Whenever there was an Ofsted agent coming to class, poor teachers were terrified. So, and the lesson was not natural. And I had an experience when I was there with the same group, same teacher, like watching a class, and then the lesson was very fluid. They had very good report and everything. And when Ofsted was watching, it was not a picture of the reality. So really. And then these things, these elements, so teachers do not have time to observe their colleagues teaching. They do not get ideas from each other. They do not share. So I don't know what my colleague next door is doing and what has been successful and what's failed to, because we need in our profession the maturity to talk about errors, because what we do, like we say, we deal with human beings. There is a lot of trial and error, right? It's the essence of teaching. What I do for this student may not work for another one. And so we need to be mature to talk about these things too. But if we are not getting together to talk, how are we going to develop that maturity? So this is one problem. And this is leading to another problem, Graham. Huge one. It is the fact, and it's happening here in the UK, it's happening in other places. In Brazil, it's huge. When a teacher reaches a point of seniority as a teacher, when he has enough experience and all of that, and he reaches a point where he or she needs to be promoted. They need to be promoted. So then, in most cases, believe me, in Brazil this is happening, and here too, they are given the chance to be promoted. And it's like this, okay, we have a position for you, and you will become a coordinator or an academic manager of sorts, or a principal. So they are not given the chance to have a teacher training position, a teacher training role. So teacher trainers in public school systems, private school systems, and language schools are going extinct, little by little in some contexts. Other contexts still do keep that, and that is leading to a crisis, because how the collaborative practices are going to be fostered without technical leadership? We have managerial leadership, which is fine, we need it, but what about the technical leadership to bring those teachers together? So that's one of the elements that is also, from my experience, that is very tricky when it comes to decentering ELT.
Yeah, so you're talking there about decentering ELT, meaning also the idea of looking at management and how a system is structured and organized, because it's important that, as you say, that there is an opportunity for teachers to be able to improve, to develop. So teacher development is so important with every teacher, and that requires people, mentors, teacher trainers, teacher developers, to guide that. And if that isn't happening, if the best teachers are being filtered into management in Brazil, for example, as you say, then there's a kind of flaw in the system. How do you change something like that? Is it possible to change it? Is it something that has been raised? And just another technical point, Leonardo, I can hear your breathing. It sounds a little bit like you're Darth Vader at the moment. So
sorry.
If you move the microphone away from your mouth, either below or if that's possible, that would be great. So how do you change that, Leonardo, do you think? Is it possible to change that in Brazil, for example, in your context?
That's a good question. And I have an experience, and it's a small scale, and I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how we could replicate anything like that in a larger scale. But I worked for an institution that serves multiple educational avenues. They have a high school, and vocational school, and the language school. And it's all on the same campus in Brazil, in Recife. And what happened is that we had that sort of leadership hierarchy, and we missed teacher trainers at the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is, of course, we started discussing things together. It didn't come from myself alone. I was with some colleagues, and we raised that need. We talked to leadership, but it's just not talking, because if we talk, we're going to talk to a manager about this. So, and how can a manager solve that situation? Not being an educator, so we had to come with an elaborate response. So we developed a project, and this is how things work. So we needed to, because they were very straightforward. They're like, okay, what you need to improve on. And so we decided to develop action research as teachers in the workplace.
Yeah.
To work on our needs. And because action research, it's not so common in Brazil. Because of these constraints we're talking about, teachers do not have time to do it. But we conducted that anyway. And we surveyed students at the beginning of the academic year to identify some needs, and then we're like, okay, I have some good action research themes. The other teachers who were working with me, they had those as theirs as well. And then after 6 months working with the students and developing, we got some results of what we needed to work on. So we put that together on a project proposal. We even created something that we call the Action Research Lab, which is a place where, as teachers, we congregate. We have our meetings together to discuss our action research findings, ideas, and to reflect, to make that thing reflective and collective, something that is collaborative in nature, so that we could contribute to each other's action research. And then one of the things at the end that we proposed from our project was the creation of roles of teacher trainers, and we had the data, we had everything. So that built a strong case at institutional level to our leaders, and so they decided to employ that, and they created teacher training positions at the workplace.
Mm.
Yes, but you see the amount of effort that it took.
Yes, and
it
the
was a lot.
Action Research Initiative, that was something that you and your fellow teachers did of your own accord. It wasn't something that was suggested by management, for example, or academic management.
No. It came from ourselves, but it was very well received, the idea. Because when
sorry to interrupt, Leonardo. This was at a school level, was it? It was within the school.
So yes, as I told you, small scale. So and in a larger scale, that would be so challenging.
Yeah. Is there any kind of knowledge sharing between teachers across schools in the area, or even at a larger scale, or is that something that doesn't usually happen in Brazil?
It doesn't usually happen. For you to have an idea, Brastiso is our largest in terms of ELT teacher association.
Yeah.
And we have only in Brazil, the British Council a few years ago had a study, and we had, if I'm not mistaken, I have that number really easy here, but it's like over 150,000 English language teachers in Brazil working in some capacity. And it's a large number. And Brastiso has about 2,000 members.
Yeah.
The membership is so small, and we don't have many local teacher associations as well. So the level of cooperation and collaboration amongst different institutions is still needs a lot of work. So it's challenging. I myself, one of the initiatives that I have when I go back to Recife is to come again together with some of my colleagues and start a teacher association. And we want to do something that is completely accessible. We want to reach out public school teachers, and we're not going to have any membership fees for our association. We're going to try to raise funds through different ways, but this is one thing, because sometimes I know that fees are not abusive, but they may be a barrier as well.
Yes, of course. That's interesting. And what about other teachers? So you've talked about English teachers. Are there any associations for non-English teachers, for subject teachers, etc., in Recife or in Brazil?
They are no much different from us, and because they face the same constraints, unfortunately, they face the same problems. So no, they are on the same level, at the same level, I'd say. And I am aware that some math teachers have done a little bit more than we have, because they have some interesting initiatives. Like they've created like chess clubs, to teach math through chess and games. So there are some initiatives like that. So the math teachers have come to get a little bit more than we have. But in terms of the humanities, us English language teachers, we are the ones who have walked the longest this path. So,
right. Okay. Interesting. Just going back to action research a little, what did you find through doing that? That was, I suppose, my question is, how important do you think is action research for teachers to be involved in? It sounds like it is something that you feel very strongly about and that you can learn from. Love to hear you talk a little bit more about that.
Oh yes, action research. I'll tell you, like I've been doing for some years now. It's been consistently since 2016. Been doing it. I did a little bit before, but let's say that it saved my life as an educator during the pandemic.
Right.
Because during that time where we had that major shift, and going through that change, everything going remote, it was really hard to produce engagement when delivering classes and building that experience. So action research at that time was a moment that I had, because it created some gaps, some time to do something, to reach out to the students a little bit more, because we know that remotely, especially for our culture in Brazil, you've been there, Brazilians are huggers and kissers, so the effective support changed without that human contact.
Yeah.
So what through that we could learn, how can I please students, make this a more pleasant experience to them and to myself as a teacher. And so we started really understanding, at least myself, for me, what is a student-centered teaching environment and all of that, because everything that I was trying to do was because of the students, really, to spend more time understanding them, their needs and everything, and how to make remote learning a more pleasant experience for them, because we weren't there with them. There was no effective support. So this was a way to do that, and through that got some action research topics, such as the community projects. I do a lot of that. I love project-based learning. And how would we do it when we can't have much contact with the members of our communities? What can we do? So students came up with brilliant ideas, and I had one experience with some students. We created some extra classes for the students at the time with different topics. So, and the technology club was one of them. And so, from the technology club, I had 4 teenage students, brilliant ones, who identified a problem with the rubbish collection, the inconsistencies and everything that the schedule did not meet the needs, really, because they're like, oh, there is a 2-day gap, but too much
This
rubbish.
is rubbish collection in the city or in the school?
In the city.
Okay.
In the city, in the neighborhood, within the neighborhood. So, and they were like, oh, and they told me, and they're like, so, okay, what's the idea you have? And they were like, a teacher, we want to create a smart bin. I was like, come again? We want to create a smart bin. What do you mean by a smart bin? Okay, this is what we do. Because when they came, they took so long, all the bins were just filled up.
Yeah.
And then after the weekend, that's after the weekend, but they take a 2-day gap again, and they come during the week, but there is not that much rubbish. And so their idea, they are doing this in Brazil. They are developing a system for the bin. It's like a bin for public places or even for the houses, where there is a device triggered where the collection company would be warned when it is filled up. So they would strategize better the collection. And so that was one of the ideas they had. They're like, because they see that it's not just a matter of that. It gets the streets with all that rubbish and diseases and maybe some animals, rats, can start showing up and can be a real community problem because of that. And that is a real issue in Brazil where we live, So they're like, okay, these smart bins would be available to the public, a very basic system. And they even they research about pricing and everything, and I do not remember the figures at the moment, but it was very low cost, something that would be very easy, And these kids, they are developing this. They haven't yet finished the project, but they have received scholarships and funding because of that idea. And all that we did was during the pandemic, we provided a space for the students to come up with their own ideas and their own things and their wants, needs, and interests. And because we all wanted that effective support, we wanted to talk to each other. We wanted that time together. And that was all designed because of action research. So,
that sounds amazing. It's such a good idea, that idea of a smart bin. And taking it a step further, you could monitor how quickly the bins fill up in different areas, so you could see if there are enough bins in particular areas, or whether they need to have more, etc. There's so much you can do there through collecting that data. That's sounds great. I hope they go on to bigger and better things. And this idea of action research, then I kind of assume that action research is something that teachers do in their classrooms, but it sounds like the way that you designed and implemented it was very much to do with involving the students in identifying things to work on. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
That's interesting. It's a different kind of of action research. So you got the students to think of things in their daily lives that could be changed or that they thought could be done better. Is that right? And they had to research it?
Yes, they had to research it, and the data that they provided me tailored my classes, tailored my teaching, and it offered some insights for colleagues at the time. I had a teacher training position, so it was very, very useful, and they replicated that experiment with their own students. And so what we really employed some student-centered strategies right there, and those, they drove the action research conducted at the time. It was interesting and different, as you said.
Very interesting. That's great. So, Leonardo, I think what I'd like to do now is to move on to your interest in artificial intelligence and English language teaching, because you're currently working on a dissertation for your master's in this. When did you decide to make this your focus?
Since the launch of OpenAI's ChatGPT, I've been using that and been trying to get my students in using that as well, and trying to be literate in terms of using AI. So right when I got the scholarship, that idea was already mine, because I already had I had at the time some experience in using AI in the classroom and for other things. So I was like, okay, but this is so new. There are so many affordances, but there are constraints as well. So it was not the idea of researching this was not, despite the fact that I like it, and it's not something that was out of passion. Let's say it was out of concern as well, being concerned with this. So trying to identify affordances, constraints, and some things, it's, so that was based on semi-structured interviews with some teachers based in Pernambuco, Brazil. Different contexts, public school, private language schools. So I talked not to those who have been using AI, but also those who haven't as well, and to understand why they haven't used. And there were so many interesting things coming out from this. And one of the things, and I had a little experience myself, it's about the teachers have also recommended students using for practicing their speaking, their writing, their productive skills. Because as we know, Brazil is widely monolingual. We can catch a plane in Manaus and fly 5 hours straight down south, and we're going to be still speaking Portuguese. So for some people, there aren't enough opportunities to practice outside the classroom. So this provided an accessible opportunity if the person has a device and has a connection, can use AI enabling tools to practice. But one of the uses that is very, very impressive, and I tried that myself, is about social-emotional learning. And there is not a space for this in my research at the moment because it's master's, but maybe in the future. But I had an experience when I had a few hours teaching some students based in Turkey, one-on-one lessons. Two of them had promotions, and they had achieved positions where they needed to deliver training in public and in English because they were in global teams. The two of them were terrified at doing that. One of them the problem that she had was with English. So it was more something on the grounds of the affective future hypothesis, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more because she was highly proficient at her job, but with English she had more difficulties in communicating and that. So the other one rather was something that was a little bit beyond our educational expertise, because it was something that has to do with the social settings in general. So and I even talked to him. I advised therapy at the time, which he went for. He's been doing it. But the thing is, we used AI to mitigate those things, and some mindfulness exercises with AI, like those that we do, like speaking in front of the mirror, like you having yourself as your audience,
Yeah.
And so AI would serve as an audience, then myself, then with me during our sessions, and that helped them ease that burden in speaking in public. So,
and that was through ChatGPT, was it?
And other tools as well. We tried there are some, Graham, I don't know if have you heard about therapy bots, Graham? Have you ever heard of those?
I have heard of. There's Replica. Would that be considered a therapy bot? That was pre-OpenAI. I tried that out, but that was quite a long time ago, actually.
Yeah, Replica being one of them. Yeah, we have one called CareBot, WooBot. There are a few others, but Replica is a very common one. It's very easy to use too. It is considered a therapy chatbot. Yeah.
It was controversial, though, wasn't it? I think I remember something about there was some problem with Replica giving bad advice to a teenager. I seem to remember.
Yep, you were absolutely right. And they changed it. They've improved it, but that was not only these. There were a number of problems with other tools as well. And yeah, you're right. Right, we use others, but we use ChatGPT. We use the large language models as well, Claude and Copilot. I just wanted them to have different experience and see also, because sometimes the design of the tool makes them feel more comfortable as they practice. So I was trying to understand exactly how they would feel more comfortable. And
so it's through the practice of their speaking that they become more comfortable with using English. Is that right? Or is there something else to it?
This is one of the things. I also, there were some phases. At a certain point, I asked them to record themselves, their practices, their sections, they're practicing with AI and all of that. They listened, and it was very interesting, and because that helped them build confidence. When we talk about the affective future hypothesis, the thing there is confidence, because usually the individual may be very proficient at the activities they do, and when it comes to do that in English, there is a problem. So that helps them build confidence, because the repetition, the practice, the habit helps with that, to build that confidence, that eases and their social emotional conditions. So this was one thing, and the other thing, like the other student I told you about, there was more of a sense of a lack of comfort, let's say discomfort in social settings, speaking in public, and not just English, even in Turkish, his mother tongue, it would be a problem for him. So, and that helped too, but undeniably, and he's confessed to me that our study sessions and our practice sessions using the mindfulness exercises and his own sessions using AI. Those were very helpful. So,
wow. So, that isn't the focus of your dissertation, though? Is it more general?
It's more general, yeah, and going through the findings. But this was one of the things that was mentioned in the literature review, and two of the teachers I interviewed mentioned that, and they had no idea. So, which is great that I was involved in that kind of work. So, but they were like, yeah, I use that to help my students feel a little bit more confident. And I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah. So two of them mentioned that. One of them was very interesting, very environmentally aware, and she was like, yes, I do use ChatGPT, but not much, because every time I prompt, I spent this much energy and all of that. And it's great to see a teacher with that type of awareness. And she tries to help her students understand those issues as well. She advocates for that. It's so interesting. On the other hand, a few of them were very concerned about biases and other things. But overall, interesting. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the biases, because that is something that you see more and more is of particular concern, especially when people are, like yourself, are using generative AI tools for language learning and teaching. What have you noticed that is concerning about these AI tools when it comes to bias?
One of the things, and these recent versions have mitigated that a bit. There have been some advancements, but it is the voice that comes from the machine. It is male, American, white, and we see that through the language. And one of the problems that these systems still have in their programming is the sense of judgment. What I mean by sense of judgment, for you to have an idea, I make some prompts to test things and experiment. And one day I asked, and it was through ChatGPT, to prepare a lesson plan and see how crazy this request was. I was prompting and talking about teaching principles based on audiolingualism. And as we know, it's very based on drilling skills and repetition and all of that, and the chunks of language and all of that, to create, based on those principles, a freer conversation practice. That's almost like a paradox when it comes to teaching. And I said, okay, ChatGPT, can you provide me a good, and I used the adjective good lesson plan. And ChatGPT created one, and of course it wasn't, because it's impossible to create such thing as I requested, but created and said, okay, this is a good lesson plan. So one of the things is, when sometimes we do find biased, because these systems, these machines, they take elements from human production, and we as human beings, we are biased because we have preferences. Of course, we try to mitigate in language. We try not to express them, not to offend anyone, because everyone has their own preferences to be respected, and we're not better than anyone. And so we try to be respectful, and we preserve that. However, it takes our elements, and it doesn't have this judgment that we have, and produces something. But Graham, see, I said that it would be a brilliant lesson plan. And ChatGPT said it's a brilliant lesson plan. it just echoed what I prompted. So much of the bias that appears in the response may come from the prompt itself.
Yes. I think that's because really these tools are just trying to supply answers that they think you want to hear.
Yes,
Basically.
exactly. That's one thing that I was going to mention. The programming. Let's say that it's encoded to empathize with the user. So exactly that. So
that's behind what I think, there's a lot of sort of examples that have been shared that people, when you argue with ChatGPT and other tools about an answer, that if you arguing something is right, like 2 + 2 is 3, not 4, if you do it enough, then ChatGPT will agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you argue with ChatGPT, you win in the end.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's kind of a flaw.
It is.
But
it is a flaw, and it is a concern. And of course, those developers, they can do better. But I think ourselves as educators, we do need to educate ourselves and our students about prompting responsibly. And when we say prompting responsibly, we may first of all relate that to environmental things, but not only that. I think these elements involved biased are also equally important, and we can consider that. I'm trying to find something that's very interesting about biases, and I opened here some of the things that I've been reading. Okay, I found it. So some of the problems that we have here with biases, and let me read here. So ethical considerations, bias in AI models and potential misuse of AI generation language. Okay, so the type of biases that we have, right? The data bias, right? Because as we were saying, AI models, they learn from data, and that can reflect existing societal biases in language use and representation. So the outputs may be discriminatory, perpetuate stereotypes, and this is not all, because the algorithm bias also is like that, because even if we could provide data that is completely neutral, which I think we can't provide that. Because when we produce something, when we say something, we have the opportunity to put a lens to it, and there is a thought behind, so it's not going to be completely biased. But the algorithm bias, I think it's also it's not going to be 100% solved. And there is also confirmation bias, because this is one case when prompting, human bias can influence the output, and this is the most common one. And the implications, Graham, are like, because these can cause unfair treatment of learners, as we know, could lead to unequal learning experiences for learners. There is not a place for their identity, for their background. They potentially disadvantaging some groups, the perpetuation of some stereotypes, right? Reduce trust in technology, Graham. You and I, we love technology, and we do like technology. We do like, but one teacher that I interviewed said this, that the bias and misuse of AI can lead students and to a point where they lose trust in technology as a learning tool, hinder their engagement and motivation. And And then he noticed that because there was a certain frustration when this student was prompting something about a pop band, but AI couldn't get the response that he wanted. It was very generic, not expecting it to be a fan of that band as well. So it's quite funny, but that's a frustration for the student. So and then he's like, okay, I'm not going to prompt anymore. And according to this teacher I interviewed, this student hasn't prompted ever since. So that experience, that failed experience, there is racial bias, as we know, gender bias, cultural bias, language bias. But most important, Graham, is what we can do. Because we can critically evaluate those tools. We can consider the potential biases of any AI tool using. And for example, at the university, and this is interesting, there was I was a facilitator of an interdisciplinary academic program during term 2 called Grand Challenges. And in one of the groups with some undergraduate students, I happened to come across this student. He's an undergrad student, and he developed a system that mitigates bias. It's in ChatGPT, and it's quite effective. And he was looking for people to help him improve the parameters, to identify bias and to mitigate it. And so I was like, okay, how come you study here and I haven't heard of you? And another thing about collaboration, sometimes we don't know what happens across different departments, even within the same organization. Coming back to the Decentering ELT conversation we were talking about. But yeah, and he's being funded by the university too, so his project is very solid. So we've been in talks for a few months with Alexander, and it's brilliant. So we can contribute as educators because, Graham, we prepare people for society, and people are going to be using those things. And we can also educate people to use prompt responsibly, because I think this is going to be part of the education process of teaching and learning. And very near future, we have to be mindful of the language. As language teachers, we have to be mindful of the language using prompts, avoiding any phrasing that could lead to biased output. So imagine how the work of a language teacher will be crucial to that.
Yes.
We have a lot to offer here. I think we can promote critical thinking, because some of the prompts are very task-based, but other prompts have to be very creative. So we do have a lot to offer. We can seek the perspectives. We can cooperate with diverse stakeholders in the selection and implementation of AI tools. It's something that I've been trying to do to make sure they are inclusive, actable, and all of that. We can leverage the potential for AI prompting, minimizing the risks of bias and misuse. So I think there is a lot that we can do concerning this point about mitigating bias. I really do. I think we have an opportunity to make a difference here.
Yes, no, I agree with you, definitely. Leonardo, I'd like to ask you a little bit more. You mentioned that you've been surveying teachers, including those who are not using AI. I'd love to hear more about the reasons they have said why they have stayed away from it. Is it fear of the unknown? Is it a kind of more of a rejection of this type of technology? What have you found in your interviews or surveys?
Well, 2 points have stood up mostly, and I'm just going to tell you. One of them, it is the fact that, and it was a very sincere account, that to 3 of them felt that they do not have enough computer digital literacy for it. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. And maybe the first thought would be, okay, to what generation do they belong to? One of them is fairly young. And this was very interesting, and it's like and also this one, especially this younger teacher, she mentioned that not only the digital, the literacy, but also the research skills, because right now ChatGPT is online, isn't it? So it can do a Google search now. So, and she's learned that some of these results come wrong, and she's right. She happens to be right, because ChatGPT, for those live search, it doesn't use its mainframe, the data set, the huge data sets there that are consolidated, right? Needs to use some other means to organize that type of result. So it's some inferencing things that happen in the programming that bring those results. And so for you to have an idea, Graham, there is a colleague here in Exeter. She does what she's taking another master's in education. I think it's in educational leadership. She was assigned to use ChatGPT for a specific assignment, and ChatGPT cannot find references and sources precisely. It fails quite a bit. In her practices, it fails to give precise references to almost 50%. So that's a lot of inconsistency. So this teacher said she didn't come up with these data. I had this from the back of my mind, but she said, and I don't trust, because I know it fails to give authentic sources. It fails quite often. So especially when we do something with academic rigor. So that was quite interesting. So she created this aversion to AI because of these issues. She was one. The other thing that happened, two of them mentioned something similar to what you said, the fear of using, and they are this fear of using in the future of the unknown is basically like they think if they promote this too much, they will hinder creativity, student creativity. So this is one point, and I think is valid. This is what we've been trying as educators to improve and to learn more about how to develop better, which is a valid point. So both of them. But these two were the ones that stood out the most. Yeah.
Yes. No, I think this idea of being concerned about the effects of embracing the use of AI is very valid. This idea of will it affect creativity? I can't remember now what the source was, but I saw something about AI already having an impact on students' reading skills, for example. So I think if we allow AI to become, if we're more reliant upon it to the extent of ignoring some of these skills that students, for example, need to develop, then that's going to be a very negative thing. But I think the danger is, of course, is that we are only at the beginning of this, and we don't really know what the consequences are. So it's important that we move forward carefully.
I agree. We have to tread carefully on this one. I feel like we're still, despite being very exciting, I think we're still walking on eggshells here.
Exactly. So, Leonardo, it's coming to the end of the hour and a half of the show. So I'd just like to thank you so much for joining me and sharing what you've been up to in the UK. It's been great to hear about all of the things you've been doing for your dissertation and your experience of decentering ELT and of action research as well. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thanks for having me, Gren. It was lovely Sunday conversation. I love to talk about these things. Thank you very much.
And enjoy the rest of your time in rainy Exeter. I hope the weather I hope it doesn't rain all the time you're there.
But it is rainy, but you know what? The temperature is lovely. Like at the moment, we are 17, 18 degrees, so it's lovely.
It's not going to stay that way, Leonardo, I'm afraid. You're going to want to head back to Recife very soon, I think.
Yeah, I'll be heading back in a couple of months, so still be here till the end of the year. But before Christmas, be there. My family's dying to see me.
Of course. Well, the weather will be much better as well when you go there.
Oh yeah, it'll be very hot.
All right, Leonardo. Thank you very much for talking to me, and take care.
You too. Likewise. Bye-bye.
Bye. So that brings us to the end of today's Twilight Show, everybody. Many thanks to today's special guest, Leonardo Lima, and to all of you who joined us live, and also to those of you listening back to the recording.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK. Home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development program, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
And so that's it from me for today. There are Teachers Talk radio shows all week on all manner of interesting topics, so please listen in live or to the recordings, and I hope you will join me again next week at the same time. Bye for now.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.